I'm driving home after work, listening to the radio. There's a show on. The essence is that you need to declare your love to your other half, and that you reciprocate. And if everything goes smoothly, they give out a prize. Call a man, dial his girlfriend. She naturally does not know that everything is live. He begins to apologize for his mistakes, ask for forgiveness, confess that he loves, and that depressed, very reluctant and coldly responds. He goes back and forth and finally asks, "Well, tell me that you love me." At the other end of the long pause and the same quiet, tired voice, "Buy some toilet paper." Story 2. My first marriage was on the verge of collapse. I thought so. In fact, my wife was already with someone else with all her body and soul. And I decided to make one last dash to Thailand, the two of us. What could be more beautiful? A change of scenery, solid positive, and all that. Well, and kind of make up and live happily ever after. And Pompeii in one day. But I was softly rejected under the sauce that the bridges are burned. Love is gone. The tomatoes are wilted. I grieved, but the voucher is irretrievable. And I suggested to my acquaintance, cute, yes, to go with me. Without intimacy and everything else, but just for company, at my expense. Well, she thought a little and agreed. I replaced the data of the second vacationer and we went. No regrets. 5 years of marriage already. Story 3. I recently read a story about how cats can heal. I never believed in such things myself until I came across it. I never really cared much for cats, but then my wife brought me a kitten. It was a smooth-haired kitty, white with opalines on her ears and paws, and her tail was like a squirrel's, very fluffy. It turned out to be a mix of an Angora cat and a common cat. My wife named the cat Louise. I to the kitten is not particularly penetrated, but argue with my wife did not become. Louise was a smart, playful kitten, very fond of communication, and tried in every possible way to melt my heart. About 2 years later, I got very sick. We wrote it all off as a simple flu, cough, runny nose, fever. Doctors prescribed medicines against flu, and I started to be treated at home. There was no improvement. It seemed to me that every day I was getting worse and worse. I was bringing the temperature down, and it was rising. My wife was there for me. She wasn't working at the time. After a week, I collapsed completely and couldn't even get out of bed. Louise immediately began to come to me and lie down at my feet, and then she moved higher and higher. I didn't chase her away. I felt better and fell asleep for a while. My wife called an ambulance when my temperature rose again and I was rushed to the hospital. They took an X-ray and saw that I had pneumonia. I don't know the medical terms, but they told me that the pneumonia was a long time ago, and on the X-ray it was as if there was no progression. I don't know how to explain it. It was like she was healing herself. That same night, my wife called me and told me that Louise was sick. She took her to the vet and they said she had pneumonia. It turns out that our Louise had taken some of the disease on herself. Fortunately, both Louise and I recovered, but it was a long treatment. Now I have a completely different attitude to cats, and 6 months ago I brought home a ginger cat from the street. My wife was very surprised. Louise took the new tenant with great pleasure, replaced his mother. She takes care of him and protects him. Story 4. A scene in a store, grocery store, a long line. A grandmother comes up, a dandelion, shivering, with a stick. So decrepit that the whole line sympathizes and lets her go. Granny takes bread, kefir, trembling hands, pulls out change, lips moving, and then one aunt couldn't stand it. "Grandma, is there no one to take you to the store? If you live alone, you should ask your neighbors." "How could I live alone? I live with my daughter," answers the dandelion of God. "Well, what's she doing?" Lean. Chorus. "How can you trust today's youth with anything? You can't rely on them at all." With obvious indignation. "And how old is your daughter?" 70 in a month. No comment.